We've all been there. You sit there, staring at a blank screen or a fresh notebook, overwhelmed by the weight of what's ahead. You think to yourself, I'll start once everything is perfect. Once I have all the resources, the knowledge, the plan in place, then I'll begin. It's a familiar feeling, but here's the hard truth. That perfect start you're waiting for, it doesn't exist. The myth of the perfect moment is something we all fall for. We convince ourselves that the stars need to align, that we need the perfect conditions before we can take action. Maybe you need more time, more money, more experience, or the perfect strategy. But in reality, waiting for everything to fall into place is just a way to delay moving forward. Perfection is an illusion, and chasing it can keep you stuck in one place for far longer than you realize. Think about it. When was the last time you saw someone achieve greatness from a perfectly paved path? When did you hear of a success story where everything was easy from the start? The truth is, successful people didn't wait for perfect conditions. They created their own momentum by acting despite the uncertainty. They didn't wait for the stars to align. They made the first move, and in doing so, things started to fall into place. It wasn't their starting point that made them successful, but their ability to start at all. We've all heard the story of Thomas Edison, right? The man who invented the light bulb after countless failures. He didn't have all the answers, nor did he have all the resources in the world. But instead of waiting for the perfect conditions, Edison worked with what he had, learned from every setback, and eventually lit up the world. He didn't wait for the right time, he made the time right. In your own life, you may feel that you're not equipped for the challenges ahead. Maybe you feel like you don't have the skills or resources to succeed. But that's the illusion of the perfect start at work. When you wait for everything to line up, you're missing out on the power of action. Starting where you are is all about letting go of the idea that everything needs to be figured out before you begin. It's about embracing the uncertainty, taking that first step, even if you don't know what the next one looks like. You might not have all the tools, the knowledge, or the experience, but you have one thing that's far more important: the courage to begin. There's a quote that says, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now." If you're waiting for the perfect moment, think about all the time you've already wasted. How much further could you be today if you had just started earlier? That doesn't mean you can't start now. It means that perfection will never come if you keep waiting. Progress comes from the act of moving forward, no matter how small the step. And here's the thing. Taking that first step doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means you're giving yourself permission to grow along the way. It means you're allowing yourself to learn from mistakes, to stumble, and to pick yourself back up again. Because let's be honest, no one has it all figured out when they begin. We all start somewhere, unsure and imperfect. The key is to start anyway. So, if you've been waiting for the perfect conditions to take action, here's your permission slip to stop. Stop waiting for the right moment. The moment is now. Start with what you have, where you are, and let the journey unfold as you go. The perfect start isn't the one with everything aligned. It's the one where you begin despite the chaos, despite the uncertainty, and despite the fear. Once you take that first step, the rest of the path will start to reveal itself. And that's when progress truly begins. We've all been there, standing at the base of a huge mountain, looking up at the long, seemingly endless path ahead. The goal feels so far away, and the challenge seems insurmountable. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, to think that the journey is too difficult or that the mountain is simply too big to climb. But here's something important to remember. Big changes, monumental achievements, and life-altering success don't come from giant leaps. They come from small steps. It's natural to want to rush forward, to jump ahead and skip all the hard parts. But the reality is, the path to success is built one small, deliberate step at a time. Every little action you take, no matter how minor it seems, adds up. And those small actions, when compounded over time, can move mountains. Think about a moment in your life when you achieved something that made you proud. Maybe it was a project you completed, a personal goal you crushed, or a challenge you overcame. Now, ask yourself, did you reach that point with one giant leap? Or was it the result of consistent, small efforts over time? Chances are it was the latter. It's the days of showing up, the moments when you pushed yourself to do just a little bit more, even when the progress didn't seem significant. It's the hours of preparation, the minutes of focus, the steps that seemed small at the time, but ultimately led to something much bigger. Success isn't a one-time thing. It's the culmination of many small, sometimes seemingly insignificant, actions that accumulate over time to create lasting change. This doesn't just apply to big goals or long-term dreams. In fact, it's often the small steps that make the biggest difference when you're stuck or unsure of how to proceed. When you're overwhelmed by the big picture and paralyzed by the sheer size of the task at hand, the answer isn't to run away or wait for the perfect moment. The answer is to take that next small step, whatever it may be. It could be as simple as opening a book when you're trying to learn something new. It could mean writing just one sentence when you're facing a blank page. It could be taking a short walk when you're feeling sluggish or overwhelmed. These small actions might seem trivial in isolation, but they matter. Each one propels you forward, no matter how slowly. In fact, small steps are often more powerful than we give them credit for. Why? Because they're easier to sustain. A single step doesn't feel as daunting as trying to tackle the entire journey all at once. Small steps are manageable, and that manageability keeps you going, even when motivation is low. It's easy to lose track of the bigger goal, but when you focus on the tiny wins, the little things that move you forward, you can keep your momentum going. It's the consistency of those small steps that builds a habit, and it's the power of habit that drives long-term success. Think about it. Every professional, every athlete, every expert in any field started with small steps. They didn't just wake up one day as the best in their field. They built their expertise, their success, and their mastery by consistently showing up, doing the work, and taking small steps towards improvement every single day. The key to this approach is persistence. It's the ability to show up even when you don't feel like it. It's about putting in the work when it feels hard or when progress seems slow. It's the patience to trust that your small steps are adding up, even when you can't see immediate results. And remember, the small steps are often the ones that matter the most. They keep you moving forward when everything else feels stagnant. They allow you to celebrate victories along the way, even when the destination still feels far off. It's those little victories that keep your spirit alive and your momentum strong. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed or uncertain, don't try to tackle everything at once. Break it down into small, manageable steps. Take one step forward, then another, and then another. Before you know it, you'll find that the path is no longer as unclear as it once seemed. Each small step will bring you closer to your goal, and those little steps will add up to something huge. The power of small steps lies in their ability to keep you going. They may seem small in the moment, but they're the secret to achieving anything, no matter how big. Keep stepping, even when you can't see the entire staircase, because every step you take brings you closer to where you want to be. When you think about the word scarcity, what comes to mind? Maybe it's the feeling of not having enough time, money, or resources to achieve your goals. It's the moment when you're faced with limitations that seem impossible to overcome, and it can feel like the deck is stacked against you. But what if I told you that scarcity isn't just something that holds you back? It's also the thing that can push you forward. Throughout history, some of the most remarkable innovations and success stories have emerged from the very conditions that seemed like obstacles. When resources were limited, people didn't give up. They got creative. They turned scarcity into opportunity, and it became the catalyst for breakthroughs, change, and growth. Let's start by thinking about the story of Apple. The tech giant we know today didn't start with vast resources, a massive team, or an endless budget. In fact, Apple began in a garage with Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne. Three guys with a vision but no real funding. At first, they didn't even have the tools they needed to create the computers they dreamed of building. Yet, they were undeterred by what they lacked. They made do with what they had, repurposing old equipment and learning along the way. Their scarcity became a breeding ground for innovation. The limitations they faced weren't roadblocks. They were the very things that pushed them to think outside the box and come up with creative solutions. This story is far from unique. Many of the greatest success stories we know today were born out of scarcity, not abundance. Consider the story of J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. At the time, she was a single mother living on welfare, struggling to make ends meet. She didn't have the financial resources to promote her writing or secure an expensive writing desk. But she had something more important, a story to tell. She used what little she had, time, a pen, and paper, and began writing the first chapter of what would become one of the most successful book series in history. She didn't have the money or the fame to back her up, but what she lacked in resources, she made up for in persistence and creativity. Then there's the story of the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur. These two men didn't come from wealthy families, and they didn't have access to the cutting-edge technology of their time. In fact, the tools they had were rudimentary, and they had no formal training in engineering. But they had a dream. They were determined to build the first airplane, and despite the scarcity of resources and knowledge, they refused to give up. Through trial and error, countless failures, and a deep belief in their vision, they eventually achieved the impossible. Their success didn't come from having the best tools or the most money. It came from using what they had, learning from every mistake, and refusing to let scarcity stop them from achieving their goal. These stories have one thing in common. Scarcity was not the end of the road. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. When you're faced with limited resources, it's easy to feel like you're at a disadvantage. You might think, if I only had more time, more money, more knowledge, then I could make this happen. But the truth is, scarcity forces you to think differently. It challenges you to be resourceful, to innovate, and to come up with solutions that you might not have considered if everything was handed to you on a silver platter. In many ways, scarcity is a gift. It's an opportunity to tap into your creative potential, to build something new out of what you already have. When you have limited resources, you don't have the luxury of sitting back and waiting for everything to be perfect. You have to take action with what's available to you, and in doing so, you may uncover new ways of thinking, new possibilities, and new opportunities that you might never have discovered if you had everything you needed from the start. It's important to remember that challenges are not barriers. They're invitations to innovate. When you're faced with scarcity, the road might be harder, but it's also where you'll find the growth. It's where you'll develop the skills, the mindset, and the resilience that will ultimately set you apart from others. So, the next time you feel like you're at a disadvantage because of what you don't have, remember, scarcity isn't a roadblock. It's a starting point. It's your opportunity to get creative, to push your boundaries, and to find new ways to achieve your goals. The challenges you face today could very well be the spark that lights the fire of your future success. We've all experienced it, the excitement of starting something new. Whether it's a project, a goal, or a dream, the initial burst of motivation feels incredible. You're fueled by energy, ideas are flowing, and it seems like nothing can stop you. But then, the honeymoon phase ends. The thrill starts to fade, the newness wears off, and suddenly, you're left questioning if you can keep going. Motivation is no longer as strong as it was, and the path ahead feels harder than you imagined. It's in these moments that many people give up. The drive they felt at the beginning isn't there anymore, and they assume that without motivation, they can't succeed. But here's the key. While motivation is powerful, it's not the real secret to long-term success. The true secret ingredient is momentum. Momentum is the force that carries you forward when motivation fades. It's the result of small, consistent actions that build upon each other and create a chain reaction of progress. When you focus on creating momentum, you tap into a powerful energy that keeps you moving, even when your initial excitement begins to wane. Think of it like pushing a boulder up a hill. At first, it's incredibly hard to get it moving. You're putting in a lot of effort, and it feels like the boulder is never going to budge. But once it starts rolling, it gains speed. The more you push, the easier it becomes to keep it moving. Momentum works the same way. At first, the effort feels like it's all uphill. But once you start taking those small actions, no matter how tiny they seem, you begin to create momentum. That momentum then becomes your ally. It helps you keep going when things get tough. Here's the best part about momentum. It doesn't require you to have unlimited energy or to be constantly motivated. All it needs is that first small action. When you show up and do something, anything toward your goal, you're building momentum. And that small win, no matter how insignificant it feels, makes it easier to take the next step. It's like a snowball effect. Each action adds weight and power to the next, gradually propelling you forward. For example, let's say you want to write a book. At first, the idea of writing hundreds of pages might seem overwhelming. But instead of focusing on the massive end goal, you simply decide to write 100 words today. It's a small step, but it's enough to start the process. Tomorrow you write another 100 words, and the next day, another 100. Slowly, you begin to notice that the task doesn't feel so impossible anymore. As you keep showing up, the words begin to pile up. Before you know it, you've written a chapter, then several chapters, and eventually, a book. That's momentum in action. The beauty of momentum is that it makes the hard days easier. When you've built enough momentum, the act of moving forward feels almost automatic. You don't need to rely on motivation to push yourself, because the momentum is doing the heavy lifting. It carries you through the days when motivation is low or when life gets in the way. It becomes a steady force that propels you toward your goal, even when everything around you feels uncertain. But how do you start building momentum if you're feeling stuck? The answer is simple. Take that first small step. It doesn't matter if it's perfect or if you feel ready, just do something. Even the smallest action, like setting a timer for 5 minutes to work on your goal, can create the initial spark. From there, the momentum starts to build, and you'll find that the path forward becomes clearer. Momentum also has a way of boosting your confidence. Every time you take an action, you prove to yourself that you're capable of making progress. Even if it's not a huge leap forward, those small victories accumulate, and they build your belief in your own ability. It's easy to get discouraged when you're not seeing immediate results, but momentum teaches you to trust the process. It reminds you that the little things matter and that those small steps are laying the foundation for something much bigger. In fact, the more you embrace momentum, the more you realize that it's not about waiting for motivation to strike. It's about doing the work, no matter how small the work is, and letting momentum carry you through the tough times. It's about showing up, even on the days when you don't feel like it, and trusting that the act of showing up will eventually lead to progress. So, when you find yourself struggling to stay motivated, remember this: momentum is the secret ingredient. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the motivation to arrive. Start with one small action and let the momentum take care of the rest. With each step forward, you'll build the energy and momentum needed to keep you going, no matter how long the journey may seem. And before you know it, you'll find that you've gone further than you ever imagined, simply because you kept moving. The road to success is never a straight line. In fact, it's filled with bumps, detours, and plenty of unexpected potholes. And while we may hope for a smooth ride, the reality is that setbacks, mistakes, and failures are all part of the journey. But here's the thing: we're often taught to avoid imperfection at all costs. We're encouraged to get everything right the first time, to look flawless in every effort, and to never make mistakes. Yet, the truth is that it's in those very imperfections where true growth happens. Mistakes aren't failures. They're lessons in disguise. Every misstep, every miscalculation is a valuable experience that teaches us something essential. Think about it. If we were perfect from the start, we'd never learn, never grow, and never improve. Imperfection is the very foundation of progress. It's what forces us to adapt, rethink, and find creative solutions. Take a moment to think about some of the world's greatest innovators and visionaries. People like Albert Einstein, Steve Jobs, and Michael Jordan didn't achieve greatness by being perfect. In fact, they each faced setbacks that could have stopped them in their tracks. Einstein didn't speak until he was 4 and was considered slow by his teachers. Steve Jobs was fired from the company he founded, Apple, before returning to lead it to world-changing success. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team, yet he went on to become one of the greatest athletes of all time. These are people who embraced imperfection and used their failures as stepping stones toward success. So, why do we run from mistakes? Why do we fear imperfection so much? Part of it comes from the pressure we place on ourselves to get everything right. We live in a world that often celebrates perfection. The perfectly curated Instagram posts, the flawless presentations, the seemingly effortless accomplishments. But this obsession with perfection can be paralyzing. It can keep us from starting because we're so afraid of doing something wrong. Here's the key to remember. Imperfection is part of the process. It's not something to avoid or fear, but something to embrace. Each mistake, every obstacle you encounter, is a chance to learn and grow. Without those experiences, you wouldn't have the wisdom, resilience, or creativity that will eventually lead you to success. The truth is, growth doesn't happen when everything is going perfectly. It happens when you face challenges and choose to keep going, despite them. It happens when you take what you've learned from your setbacks and apply it to move forward. Each time you try again, you become a little bit stronger, a little bit smarter, and a little bit closer to your goals. Think about the process of learning to ride a bike. At first, you might fall over and scrape your knee, but you don't give up. You get back up and try again. You might even fall a few more times, but with each attempt, you get a little better. Eventually, you find your balance, and the journey becomes smoother. The key isn't avoiding the falls. It's learning how to rise after each one. This same idea applies to anything you're trying to achieve. Whether it's starting a business, writing a book, or learning a new skill, there will be moments where things don't go according to plan. You'll stumble, doubt yourself, and feel like giving up. But those moments are not the end. They're part of the journey. And the more you embrace those imperfections, the more you'll grow. Embracing imperfection doesn't mean accepting failure or settling for mediocrity. It means giving yourself the freedom to learn, experiment, and improve without the constant fear of being judged or criticized. It means recognizing that every step, even the missteps, is a valuable part of your story. And here's something else to keep in mind. Nobody is watching you as closely as you think they are. Most of us spend so much time worrying about what others think, but the truth is, most people are too focused on their own journey to judge yours. The only person you need to prove anything to is yourself. So, how do you begin to embrace imperfection on your journey? First, give yourself permission to fail. Understand that it's okay not to have everything figured out right away. Take risks, make mistakes, and view each setback as a stepping stone toward your ultimate success. Shift your mindset from focusing on avoiding imperfection to focusing on learning from it. Every mistake is a lesson that will make you better, more resilient, and more prepared for the future. And remember, no one's journey is without its bumps. Even the most successful people have faced failure, doubt, and imperfection along the way. What sets them apart is their ability to keep going, to take the lessons learned from their mistakes, and to use them to fuel their progress. At the end of the day, perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. What really matters is your willingness to show up, make mistakes, and keep moving forward. Because it's in embracing imperfection that you'll find your true strength, and that's what will lead you to success. So, take a deep breath, embrace the messiness of the process, and keep going. Your growth is in the imperfections.